All right, today I'm going to break down and give you my thoughts on book number 6 in the Jack Reacher series, Without Fail. And when this book first starts out, you think it's probably going to take place out west somewhere, because Reacher is in California at the opening of the book, but very quickly makes his way all the way to the East Coast in a pretty cool little road trip with some traveling musicians. Now, usually Jack doesn't travel quite as far, not quite this far from story to story. It's usually a neighboring state or just a few states away, or maybe even up or down one coast or the other. But every great once in a while, you get thrown for a loop. And that's exactly what happened in this story, where most of it takes place in Washington, D.C., but there's definitely some traveling back and forth across the United States throughout. Okay, so in this story, Reacher is sought out by a, surprise, very attractive Secret Service agent named M.E. Froelich, who knew him because she used to date his brother. Now, she didn't know him, she knew of him, but spoilers, this was, she dated him, his brother, before he died. So I hope that doesn't spoil anything, but if you're this far into the series, you've probably read the book where Reacher's brother dies. So it's been several years since the death of Joe Reacher, and this lady claims to be fully over Joe and the relationship that they had, but as it unfolds in the book, it's pretty clear that this is not the case. Anyway, she recruits Jack to basically run war games and figure out if it's possible, and if so, how it's possible, for someone to assassinate the incoming Vice President of the United States, the Vice President-elect. So Jack agrees, and he brings in his long-lost military pal, Francis Nagley, who, if you're familiar with the books, you already know, but if not, you have something to look forward to, because she is a recurring character, and she is someone that worked with Jack for years back in the military days, and she's just a fantastic character. Her and Jack are amazing together as a team, and throughout the books, you kind of hope that they're going to hook up. And, I don't want to spoil anything for anyone, so I won't. I'm not going to tell you if it ever actually happens, but it's definitely something that readers anticipate every time she makes an appearance. And I believe this is her first appearance, but I could be wrong. I could have just messed this thing up, because it's been a while since I've been through these books, and during this run through, I have actually skipped over books 3 and 4. So if it happened there, I apologize, but I believe this is her very first appearance. Anyway, she's the best. I automatically love any book in the series that includes Francis Nagley. Anyway, Reacher and Nagley quickly discover several holes in the Secret Service's defenses around the vice president, and then very quickly Froelich informs them that there actually is a plot to assassinate the vice president, and she recruits them to try and figure out who is behind the plot and to help stop it. Now, at first, this book made me think of another Reacher book called One Shot. But in my opinion, this book is so much better. I was never sure why One Shot was the first Reacher story that was developed into a film. There are just so many better stories to choose from. Maybe it just fits better as a typical conspiracy-laced, action flick. It may have been an easier story than others to adapt. I don't know. But for what it's worth, I think Without Fail is a far superior story. Now, one thing that I noticed in this book, and I notice in all the books, I love when these books deep dive. They go really deep into detail on things that common people wouldn't know. Like, digging into a field of study that most aren't familiar with. Usually something with technology, whether it be audio, video, dark web terminology, cell phones, GPS, fingerprint analysis, super deep dives on like niche historical figures or events, specific stuff that only experts in a very specific field would be privy to. In this book, one of the several deep dives is the field of lettering and font analysis, something I didn't even know existed, and the subtle difference between seemingly identical fonts and how they appear in different word processing software. Real nerd stuff. And it just fascinates me every time. I get really interested and excited about something that I never even considered thinking about before. Anyway, that's just something that I love about all the Reacher books. It's something about the character, and it's something that Lee Child does in just about every single book that it's really a big part of the Reacher stories, and I love it. Absolutely love it. All right. Before I go into any real spoilers for the book, I'll go ahead and tell you that I think it's a really great story. It's probably not in my top 5, but it's not far off either. If you're doing a read-through, this is definitely not one you want to skip over, especially with it being the first appearance of Francis Negley. Trust me, you're not going to regret it. Now, for those of you who don't mind spoilers going forward, there will be spoilers for this book, because in the past, with other reviews that I've done, people have requested that I go into the ending of the story and the climax of the story and how everything turns out. But I wanted to separate this part for people who maybe haven't read the book, but want to know if it's, worth a read. So going forward, spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. All right. So the relationship between Froelich and Reacher progresses very quickly. They hook up within days of meeting each other. And it's a weird and kind of complicated relationship because, she was once, and maybe still is, in love with his brother. And throughout the book, he's trying to figure out whether or not her feelings for him are just an extension of her feelings for his brother Joe. And eventually you kind of find out that, yeah, she's still in love with Joe and still very hurt by the fact that he left her years ago. I mean, they actually broke up a while before he was killed. So it wasn't like she lost him or something. Like, he broke up with her and she is kind of a woman scorned. She was really upset by this. All right. So one of the things in this book that I think is really cool that Lee Child does is there's this little segment in the book where you're very confused because you think that the vice president, whose last name is Johnson, has been assassinated. Because there's some people killed in the story, and Lee only refers to the people being killed as Johnson. And, you know that there are people who are trying to kill the vice president. So when you first read it, you're like, wait a minute. What? Like, they killed him off already? Like, what are they going to do now? But quickly you learn that the people being killed just happen to have the same last name. And, it was a message being sent by the assassins to scare the vice president and the Secret Service. And then the biggest shocker in the book is that Froelich is killed about 3/4 of the way through when she jumps in front of an assassin's bullet that was meant for the vice president. So, much like Killing Floor, this one turns into a book about revenge. And when Jack Reacher is out for revenge, he's going to get it. And he's going to get it in a big and meaningful way. So, in time, Reacher finds out that there are some people from the vice president's past who have it out for him. And so they figure out just who the would-be assassins are, and now it's just about tracking them down. The rest of the story is basically about Reacher and Negley trying to corner the assassins and take them out before they can finish their plot to assassinate the incoming vice president. Now, the ending. The book ends with a pretty badass car chase and a final showdown during a winter storm in Wyoming, where Reacher and Negley finally take out the would-be assassins in glorious, and if this was on screen, I would call it cinematic fashion. Now, this story didn't have as much melee fighting as I normally find in my personal favorite Jack Reacher novels. Brutal hand-to-hands are some of my favorite things about Reacher stories. But the story here more than made up for the lack of hand-to-hand combat. And like I said, it might not be in my top 5, but it's likely a top 10 book for me. Maybe someday I'll get around to actually doing a top 10 or a top 5 list for these novels. Or hell, maybe I'll just list them all in order from, worst to best, or, my least favorite to favorite. But for now, I'm going to continue going book by book and giving you my honest opinion of each. And without fail, is definitely a solid winner. Definitely worth a read, and I really enjoyed it. All right. If you are a Jack Reacher fan, be sure and subscribe to the channel. Jack Reacher content, it's not the only kind of content that I put out, but I definitely put out a lot of it. And I plan to go through all these novels one by one, reviewing them. And I'll continue to put out any Reacher news that comes across my feed, and I will most definitely be reviewing each episode of the new Amazon series due out this fall. I cannot wait for that. As I said, please subscribe. I try to put out videos daily. I'm not perfect, but I do my best, and it's pretty damn good. In addition to Reacher content, I also talk about entertainment, pop culture, current events, basically just whatever interests me and hopefully interests you as well. So if you're interested in that, if you'd like to get something new and interesting in your feed every day, then please subscribe. And if you decide to stick around and subscribe to the channel, then I will talk to you again tomorrow.